everybody. Welcome to this episode of Time to Talk, Time to Market podcast, where we discuss every interesting developments in the energy industry. And in today's episode, we will discuss the current state of European energy markets and new policies and reforms coming into effect. As David Letterman would say, our guest needs no introduction. So here we go. Let's welcome Mark Copley from Energy Traders Europe.
Thanks, Eszter, and well done for getting the new name right. It's Energy Traders Europe, never ETE, never EFET, and it's lovely to be here. Thank you very much.
This industry loves jargons and shortages, so I thought, it could be one of those things. So, Mark, thank you so much for joining. I feel so grateful that you're here with us today. Could you start by telling us a little bit about who you are and what you do? You have obviously a wealth of background. You are a veteran in the industry, so I would love to be able to share it with also people who are new to our industry. So I would be really happy if you could tell us a little bit.
I certainly do need an introduction. So my name's Mark Copley, and I've been the CEO of what used to be called EFET and is now called Energy Traders Europe for the past 3 years. I guess veteran is probably accurate, sadly, because I've been doing various things around energy for about 21 years. So I've been a regulator twice with Ofgem, and I was on the ACER board. I've been a consultant for firms in the UK.
Apologies for interrupting, but I believe you still might doing the consulting. Am I wrong?
So I'm still a consultant. So I'm in the fortunate position of being the CEO of Energy Traders Europe and being able to do fun little bits and pieces on the side if my diary and my daughter allow.
I mean, wow. I wish I had half of the experience that you have, but hopefully we are, at least we have you to share your knowledge with us, and I'm very grateful for that. Can you tell a little bit more about Energy Traders Europe and how do you support your community, your members? What is it that, how do you introduce yourself when newcomers to the industry don't know as much about you, Energy Traders Europe?
Thank you. And an opportunity for a shameless marketing plug. So first thing I'll say is I hope that your readers, your listeners, not very up with this digital age, am I? I hope your listeners have heard of EFET or of Energy Traders Europe. And if they haven't, you really ought to, people listening. So what we do is, in very simple terms, is two broad things. And we're a trade association covering people who trade electricity, gas, carbon, renewable attribute certificates. Effectively, anything you can trade in energy is what we're interested in. And we do two things. We have a standardization arm, which is designed to make trading easier and cheaper. So the EFET standard contract is what you will be very familiar with if you're trading physical gas or power across Europe. You may even have come across our free PPA standards. So we create things which make the legal business of energy trading easier through standardization. If you're exchanging lots of data, you might also be familiar with the EFET data exchange standards. And you said this gets very acronym heavy very quickly. That's electronic confirmation matching, ECM, electronic settlement matching, ESM, electronic regulatory reporting, ERR, and the list goes on. I won't bore you with the details, but that standardization effort makes the industry more efficient. And then there's the policy advocacy work we do, which is where we work with regulators, with politicians, with member state governments in Brussels and right across Europe to try and make sure markets function as efficiently as possible. So one of the nice things about my job is I might be complaining, if we're honest, but constructively engaging with the Romanian government one day and talking to a senior politician in Brussels the next. And we do try and cover national, regional, and European markets. We work to make markets right across Europe work better. And hopefully we make the 150 member companies we're lucky enough to have as members, hopefully we make their lives a little bit easier.
Of course, I'm sure you do already. Can you give us an example, actually? How do you make these companies' life easier?
So, if you're a member of Energy Traders Europe, if you're one of our regular members, you can participate in any of the working groups and task forces we have. So we've got 5 committees. We've got committees dealing with electricity, with gas, with market supervision, which I know is a particular interest of yours, with operations, and with the legal side of things. And in each of those groups, you will get information about what's going on across Europe. You'll get to sit down with your peers, potential counterparties, to discuss how the industry can react to those challenges. And you'll get a lot of information, which really will just make your day job easier and quicker. Then obviously, this is a heavily regulated sector. There's an awful lot of change. Sometimes there is strength in a common voice. And what EFET can do is provide a common voice for the industry towards politicians and policymakers, so that hopefully the direction of travel can lead to more competitive, better functioning markets, which are good, of course, for our members, but more fundamentally for customers through more security, lower prices, quicker and cheaper decarbonization.
Of course, and I'm sure that every company has this in their best interest, so to support your work as well with their activities on the markets. What are your latest focus points and activities with Energy Traders Europe?
So where we stand at the moment is kind of an interesting point. This is quite an interesting year in a way, because if you look ahead, I'm talking to you from South London, and there's lots of talk here about a UK election and when that will be held. There's also a lot of talk about the upcoming European election. So in an election year, what you're thinking about inevitably is what needs to happen over the next 5 years. And in the energy sector, we're sitting here following the COVID pandemic, where we saw the lowest levels of demand in history, and then what people have come to refer to as the energy crisis, where we saw hugely high price levels, lots of volatility, and real harm to customers. So we're still in that period where people are trying to learn the lessons and to some extent recover from those twin crises. And then we're thinking about what the political makeup of Europe is going to look like for the next 5 years. But work doesn't stop. At the same time, the scale of the challenge to decarbonize is huge. Member states are trying to get on with hydrogen strategies, with faster decarbonization. There is a huge amount happening at both domestic and at European level, and there's a huge amount of political uncertainty overlaid on top of that. So what are we trying to do? Well, I suppose to some extent kind of make sense of that. But for me, in a way, that election is a bit of an opportunity for markets, I'd like to think. We don't know who's going to win, but we do know that over the next 5 years, and indeed the next 20 years, we've got to speed up the pace of decarbonization. We've got to keep energy affordable, and we've got to keep security of supply high. Now, different parties will put different priorities on each of those parts of the triangle, but fundamentally, you've got to deliver it at least cost. And that's where a European market comes in. And I really believe if we can enhance the markets we've got, we have a really good chance of delivering each of those things. I say that, but that's not something everybody necessarily agrees with. There's a lovely statistic from Eszter through the energy crisis that there were 438 separate policy interventions in energy markets. And I think really one of the things that we're saying a lot at the moment is the energy markets we've created in Europe create a competitive advantage for Europe. There's lots of conversation about the need for jobs and growth and competitiveness, and that's absolutely right. But in my opinion, those markets are key to that. We need to keep acting together. We need to keep working in a sensible way. We need to speed up the pace of integration and not move back towards a set of national approaches. So actually, really, I see a little bit of a crossroads at the moment. I see a little bit of a kind of tipping point. Are we going to react to the threats of things like Russia together, or are we going to try and tackle it alone? And it won't surprise you that somebody who is British but a proud European thinks that we need to work more closely to deal with those huge threats of security, of climate change, and of making sure people can pay their bills.
Absolutely, absolutely. And Well, I mean, each of the topics that you mentioned could be, we could really discuss for hours, and then all of them are very interesting. And indeed, I agree. We have seen not only the future, but also, the past have been such turbulent years, and we're only licking our wounds and trying to, approach the next years in the best way possible. But, oh, gosh, let's see. Let's see what's going on and who wins at the elections. Of course, obviously, it will have an enormous effect on the energy industry. What are your largest or biggest concerns?
I believe that what the COVID crisis followed by the energy crisis shows is that Europe has an unbelievably flexible and well-functioning energy market. Anything that can deal with the lowest demand in history, followed by the challenge of getting yourself quickly off Russian gas, has to have something good about it. I go beyond that. I think this is a phenomenal achievement. It is the most competitive and best functioning energy market on the planet, as far as I can work it out. But we've seen lots of conversations that the market is broken, that marginal pricing doesn't work. And we're seeing more and more countries, as I alluded to in my last answer, thinking about things domestically. It's a good example at the moment where Germany is trying to put the costs of filling gas storage during the energy crisis onto tariffs for exports to other countries. That is destroying may be a bit strong. That is really damaging the internal market and reducing our flexibility. So the thing I am most worried about is more of those policies, is a move away from that European efficient least cost approach, which has served us well. There's a rather nice British phrase of throwing the baby out with the bathwater. So my worry is that we are going to throw the baby out with the bathwater and we don't realize what we have until it's too late. I don't argue for anything different in Energy Traders Europe that I argued for when I was a regulator. And I think that shows you why the things we're doing are so important for customers.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, absolutely. And of course, we can speculate a lot about the Russian gas and things like that. But I was just wondering while you were telling all this that, we are increasing our dependency on other sources that are perhaps more carbon inefficient.
I think the first thing to reflect on is quite what an achievement reducing Russian gas volumes was. And actually, it just tells you how that gas market is incredibly flexible. Because I'm old, I've done this for a long period of time. And the idea that European gas flows would be going west-east, not east-west, is kind of mad. If someone had said that to me kind of 10 years ago, I would have thought they were crazy. And if you look at what happened, the price reacted as it should because there was a scarce situation, and new sources of supply were brought in from other places in the world. That's kind of how the market should work. And actually, some of those sources probably led to higher carbon emissions, but it's incredibly important that we've got an ETS system in the EU which values that carbon. So that price was still reflected. What that means is that through that crisis, there were such strong incentives for innovation, for demand reduction, for new sources of supply to come forward. And that's clearly what we're going to need if we're going to decarbonize. So I believe that the fact we have a carbon pricing system which works well, it could of course work better if we were to link it to some other systems, particularly one in my own country, that would be great. Then the fact that that system is there and that system adjusts as well to give a price signal, I think is really important. The really difficult thing about policy making in Europe, and I'm not going to pretend I know how to do this, is you've got three objectives to meet. And the moment you focus on one, you inevitably have a problem with the other two. If you go to one corner of the triangle, it's almost like an elastic band. If you pull it too far, it will snap back. If you focus too much on security of supply, you will suddenly find that decarbonization slows down and affordability becomes harder. So the real challenge for anyone making policy anywhere, and I had a little bit of exposure to this in the UK government, is it's all balance. And no one's ever happy because you're constantly trying to balance three things.
Exactly. You cannot make everybody happy. I would like to shift the discussion a bit more towards the traders. These are, at least what the type of market players that we are most interacting with. So I would like to just, if you could tell a little bit about the recent changes in the policies and the REMIT reforms. What effect do you think these will have on the market entry procedures?
I think remit's important, actually. The fact that we have a robust, transparent market supervision, market surveillance regime in Europe is incredibly important. So sometimes people are surprised I say that, like, don't you want fewer rules? Well, you need trust in markets. You need data to be available, and you need sanctions if things go wrong. And that means you need well-resourced regulators, and you need nice, stable frameworks. REMIT's just over 10 years old. I think it just had its birthday, and so it was primed for an update. And that update that happened recently has positive features and has less positive features to it, if I'm being completely honest. So if I start with the parts of the reform which concerned us, there were originally proposals by the Commission to have very strong representation in the EU. That in some quarters was read as having to move trading floors from outside the EU into the EU.
Mark, can I interrupt you for a moment?
Yeah, of course you can.
You are, of course, discussing, or giving sort of an in-depth understanding, but let's say I'm a full dummy and I'm coming from a whole new industry, stepping into this, world of energy through, and I'm like sort of the Alice in Wonderland. Can you just like as easy as possible explain what is the REMIT about?
Look, REMIT is about trust in markets and making sure that if there is any market abuse, it is found and it is prosecuted. I don't wish to scare any listeners, but you can end up in jail for market abuse. There are criminal sanctions. You cannot engage in behavior which constitutes market manipulation, and that can include some things which will get very detailed very quickly, like wash trades and spoofing. There's a whole lexicon of jargon that sits below REMIT, and there are horrendously long and detailed user manuals that people are going to need to read to get into the market. So one of my pieces of information is you will need to spend a lot of time on compliance and on understanding what is out there. This is not a simple piece of legislation, but at its most simple, you need to report data on outages, on market behavior so that regulators can assess that. And you need to make sure that your trading behaviors don't constitute false and misleading information, don't basically constitute market abuse.
Right. So REMIT II comes, and then they are taking it a notch further.
I think they're updating it. So there are things within REMIT II which I think are positive. There is a focus on additional transparency. What do they call it? There's a REMIT Information Reference Center, which I've had described to me as an attempt to take the data that exists and present it in a more user-friendly form, which I think is hard to argue with. And there's attempts to update a 10-year-old piece of regulation to reflect new forms of trading. Now, algos are probably the obvious one there. The problem with being a regulator is you can never stop. The market keeps moving around you, and therefore your rules need to keep up, or they start becoming problematic for you and the market. There are also provisions in there which we were concerned about, like the one I started to mention there around needing to have a kind of trading function in the EU, which we thought would be damaging for competition, but we were pleased to see that reduced, for example. So Eszter is currently in the process of issuing some guidance to support these changes. That's a process we'll be following very closely.
Did I understand correctly? Do you mean that the trader unit in EU, so new entrants must have a legal entity in the European Union?
So that was certainly a threat in the initial draft of the proposals. That's been toned down. So I think there needs to be a representative, but that does not need to be a full trading floor, which was our worry initially. So there will need to be a representative, but that is a far less burdensome requirement than it was before. And I'd like to think that maybe some of the pressure that our members managed to exert there was helpful in getting that to a point, which I think is good for EU liquidity, because no one wants to prevent entry into the markets.
Absolutely. That is a really, really good point. And thank you so much, because also from our perspective, we see a lot of inquiries, questions, and participants that would like to enter the European power markets, or generally the energy industry, but they have a very high level of uncertainties.
So I do think though that process of engaging with the guidance is extremely
Right.
important, and our market supervision committee is really spending an awful lot of time and effort on that. And we're pleased to be on some of ACE's working groups, expert groups, through the representatives on those groups. So really, if you're out there thinking and worried about REMIT, you might want to think about why you're not members of Energy Traders Europe.
Good point. Speaking of Energy Traders Europe, and you represent a number of market players, can I just ask, what are the most frequent questions that you get from your members? What are the biggest worries they have?
That's a really difficult question because we have 150 member companies, and they vary in size, and they vary in geography. So I'm very proud that recently we had our first member from Kosovo. We've got our first member from Azerbaijan. We've got people from genuinely all across Europe, and we've got people who are trading green certificates, who are very active in green gas markets. We've got very, very large companies, our chairs from Shell, and we've got almost everything in between. And one of the beauties of working in that organization is that everybody has a different set of priorities. I suppose it would normally start with, have you got any idea what is going on in X? And then they would insert the name of the market or the country they're particularly worried about. But one of the nice things is we've got 26 people work for Energy Traders Europe within our secretariat, and we rely on our members extremely heavily. Now, each of those people are real experts in what they do. So just give you an example this week. On Friday last week, Romania issued a new law that said it was going to change its trader taxation rules and a few other bits. Now, as luck would have it, our vice chair, Luka, who's from GenI in Slovenia, was speaking at a conference in Romania on Tuesday. So we quickly reviewed that through our experts who are familiar with that market. Luka made a presentation on Tuesday in Romania. We spoke to the ministry. Pavel, who's one of my colleagues who's in Łódź in Poland, is currently finalizing our response to that. So, we didn't necessarily know that was coming, but, you get a series of phone calls that say, oh my word, have you seen this? And we kind of swing into action and try and make sure that we harness the views of all of our members and then get that to the right people at the right time. So I'm very proud of the things we do like that.
So did you manage to convince the Romanian, minister to remove that taxation?
I think that remains to be seen. What I can definitely say is some very clear messages have been sent, and we will continue to focus on that market, and indeed every market where we think improvements can be made. I mean, just to flag another piece of work we've done on behalf of our members recently, we've actually produced a summary of the barriers to competition in every electricity market in Southeastern Europe. So we have a sense of all the things we would like to see improve. This is one of those jobs, a bit like being a regulator, which does not stop. There is much we can improve in these markets. They work well, they deliver lots of value, but they can get an awful lot better. Feel I've kind of moved miles away from your question, but actually, my job in a way is to make our members happy. And so therefore, if they see an opportunity for us to act in a way which will help the market as a whole, we need to find a way to do that. And that sometimes means saying no, but hopefully it means finding ways.
And I guess your members are indeed happy, because numbers seems to be just growing one way. What are other large changes? Now we have obviously seen REMIT II coming into the market. Are there any other large changes that will bring a lot of noise?
Energy's never been more political. So if you go through an energy crisis, you will always see a political response. So at the moment, in that period pre-election, there's a huge amount going on at European level. So the electricity market design proposal, which has been worked on over the last few months, is due to be adopted by the Belgian presidency in April. That's the conclusion of a long process that my colleague Jérôme Lepage, who leads our electricity committee, has played a fantastic role in. We've then got the gas and hydrogen markets decarbonisation package, which is also close to being finalised. That's a huge piece of legislation looking at, as the name suggests, gas markets, and particularly those markets for green and decarbonised gases. Again, we've been following that extremely closely through our work in our gas committee, which my colleague Doug Wood, who many of our listeners have hopefully come across, leads. So on our policy side, you've got three very large files reaching their conclusion. The REMIT I, electricity market design, gas and hydrogen markets package. On the legal side, which is a bit more internal to us, we're in the process of updating our general agreement. That's a huge piece of work. That is the basis for trading of physical products across Europe, and our legal committee is in the process of updating that.
You mean the agreement for the bilateral trades?
Correct. That's so.
Maybe can we just super quickly touch base on that again?
Of course we can. So put it like this. If you need to negotiate a separate contract with everybody you trade with, you're going to spend an awful lot of time doing it. So what we have done, this is many moons ago, long before my time, we came up with a standard contract which people could use as the basis for OTC trading. That standardization brings down costs, increases efficiency, and is a huge step towards creating a single market. So we're really proud of that. But just like REMIT needs an update, it needs an update. It needs to get more 21st century. It needs to get a bit more electronic. It needs to get more user-friendly. And that's a process we're going through at the moment.
Have you renamed it to standardized bilateral contract? Because previously it was called, everybody just called it EFET contract. Let's get it done.
So you can still call it EFETs. I won't mind. But this is a good opportunity to tell you why we changed our name, actually, because, if people within the bubble, within the industry, know who EFET is. But if we reach out to a policymaker, if we reach out to a politician, they don't know who EFET is. So actually, I think trading is extremely beneficial for Europe. So we want to put what we do front and center in our name, so people know what we represent. So it's an external move. You might want to call it a political move, but actually, I like our new logo. I like our little. Some people call it a ball. Some people call it a pom-pom. Whatever it is, I think it's a nice signal, a nice brand, and I want people to know that if they want to talk about how to make European energy markets work better for customers, we are the people to contact.
Absolutely. Speaking of logo, I also believe it looks less, scary. Before it looked like, oh my God, you are the regulator, but now you are a bit more seamless.
I'd like to think we've never been scary, but I mean, look, I've said it during this podcast a little bit. We live in a world of difficult decisions and hard trade-offs. If there was an easy answer, we would have found it over 25 years of liberalization. So what we've got to recognize, and I say we here in the context of market participants, trade associations, and so on, is everything's a trade-off. So you have to balance different interests, different objectives. And I could sit here and tell you that pure free markets are the best way to deliver everything. And, I might believe that. But when I worked for the UK government, if I went to see my minister and said to him, Minister, what you need to do here is nothing. Don't react to this crisis. Just let the market react. He would have laughed in my face and told me that he would lose his job politically. So there needs to be a bit of pragmatism, a bit of realism. And that means understanding the constraints people face and trying to work within them as best you can. And I certainly see Energy Traders Europe as a kind of partnership body for people. So, we're not going to tell you you're completely wrong too often. We're going to try and bring forward solutions which recognize constraints and work in the best interests of Europe overall. Because ultimately, that's kind of what markets do. They optimize within frameworks created by other people, and they're really good at doing it.
And of course, that's partially to you guys, thanks to you guys as well. So thank you for the great work.
I'm claiming no credit. I've only been here 3 years, Eszter, but you're too kind.
So before we just round off our pleasant talk today, I was wondering, in your opinion, what should new entrants of the industry be aware of besides, the heavy compliance measures that they need to take, the legal constraints in terms of, the market mechanism in each country and market. Is there anything else that you think the entrants should be aware of?
You've touched on many of the things I would have said in your question there. But look, the first thing is this market needs new entry. We need innovation. We need things to be shaken up. I think all I would say is don't think it's going to be easy. This is going to be a world that changes fast, and a world from a technology perspective, from a market perspective, from a regulatory perspective, and from a political perspective. And that energy crisis has meant that energy is at the top of political agendas for governments across Europe. It keeps people in jobs. It affects every single one of our lives. So actually, there will be a lot of changes in policy. There will be a lot of reactions to external circumstances. And probably it will be global geopolitics and the way things play out that ultimately drive the way the markets in Europe evolve.
Right.
That doesn't mean we shouldn't work to prepare them, make sure we're as flexible as possible. But to be honest, the best way to work out whether I'm going to have an easy day or a hard day is to look at the TTF price.
Well, yeah, that's such a good point, and I could not have said it better. But so basically, just be agile, I suppose, and have the necessary, muscles to be able to tackle these changes that are coming your way.
And I guess I'm duty bound to say the right advisors, right, Eszter?
Is there anything else, Mark, that you would like to add or tell us, or just give a free advice?
I don't know what we round off on here. People say to me quite often, Mark, look, so you're a regulator for 9 years. You work for the government, and now you work for a bunch of traders. Isn't that weird? And it's not, because actually the energy market that we're working to create is such a positive thing for decarbonisation, which you've got a little one, I've got a little one. We want the planet decarbonised for the good of our little ones. Security of supply, well, actually, we can deliver that through markets, and affordability is incredibly important, and markets can help deliver choice and value as well. And I really hope that we are going to work together to create something which is even better at dealing with these challenges, rather than fragment back to 27 markets. And there's an irony of me saying that while I sit on an island that Brexited recently.
Mark, I just want to say thank you so much for joining me for this episode of Time to Talk. Don't forget, everybody, to connect with Mark and follow Energy Traders Europe on LinkedIn. Let us know, please, what do you think about today's episode? Would you like to see Mark again? Let me know. So on behalf of Time to Market, myself, thank you so much for your attention. Please follow us for more interesting discussions about the energy industry. And if you have any ideas on who should join us next, please let us know in the comments below. Mark, thank you once again for your time today. I am very grateful to have had you on this pleasant afternoon.
In a career before I did energy, I sold the most lawnmowers in southern England at a DIY store I used to work at. So deep down, I'm still a salesman, I think.
Love it.